You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering Finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seatbelts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty, guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal Cast. This one's kind of pretty timely and topical. So, as of recording this episode,
yes,
Wizards of the Coast has just announced new guidelines for set legality.
Yes.
As in, hey, you got the cards in your hand, as long as it's past the pre-release, guess what? You can play them.
Yep.
So, beginning on February 3rd, and starting with Phyrexia All Will Be One, if you have them, you can play them. Yes. We're going to tell you why that's dog shit.
Oh, God. It is really fucking obnoxious. It's so obnoxious. So as a vendor, if I just have a warehouse and a website, I don't care. I don't. This affects me zero. Because there's nothing in here that says I can ship my cards to you any earlier than the pre-release date. This article is also bereft of some detail, like, is the midnight pre-release on Friday the point of legality for these cards so that events can start being held on Saturday and Sunday with these cards? They say they're going to align to Arena, and Arena just goes. Same with Moto. So, until they change my street date as a vendor with a warehouse and website, I don't care. Nothing changes. However, there are other options for me. Like if I'm a vendor with a warehouse and a website and a storefront. Now, I have to allocate people to cracking and making these singles available for in-store purchase and pickup, which isn't that much different than what we were doing before, but now we have to place it in-store ready for purchase. It's got to be good to go. All of our windows move up a little bit. It moves up about a week from where it would be normally. And it also changes how we approach buying and selling in-store. It could mean a lot more sour people because we are currently cracking as they are trying to sell. And people dislike being told the price of their cards on release weekend, pre-release weekend, as you are preparing to open. So it's a little more dour.
Already opening, it's even worse.
Yeah. I assume that experience is a little more akin to what you're going to get at the LGS, and we can circle back to the third type of vendor option later, because it's a little more unique than the LGS experience.
Yeah, the LGS experience, this is just awful. Obviously, pre-selling sealed is one of the ways you cover your load on pre-releases. Selling through that product. Now I may not sell through the product as much because... And the interesting thing to me about this announcement, because you're right, it doesn't say you can ship the stuff. But if there was no chance whatsoever that you could ship it, that this was something that was just to benefit the LGS, I would think they would put it in this announcement. Because you know what there's been a lot of publicity about lately? How bad Wizards of the Coast has been for the LGS.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you want to throw a bone out there and just help them out? Now, the other thing about this is... For an LGS, if you're that top LGS in your area, this is great. You can afford to open the product ahead of time anyways. You get it a couple days prior to pre-release. You're not picking it up the day of pre-release anymore, unless you're one of the more hand-to-mouth stores. If you're a high-level account, you're one of the more accomplished LGSs in the area, guess what? You get to pick your stuff up a couple days early anyways. Well, that puts you at a distinct advantage over the other LGSs in the area.
Yeah.
Not to mention, like you said, if you're a vendor with a storefront, or, you know what, if you're a vendor like Star City that runs events like large pre-releases, this is insane. This is so bad for the LGS because of companies like Star City, which, for example, we were just looking at the new cons that were announced. In February, there is a Phyrexia All Will Be One pre-release at a Star City con. Now, if I'm an LGS that's in a 4-hour vicinity of Indianapolis, well, my players may just end up going to SCG because you know who's going to have way more product to open, who's going to have way more people there, and who's going to have way better prizes? Star City.
Well, beyond that, who can guarantee that my pre-order copies will be on-prem?
They sure will. So I can order my singles from Star City, get them delivered, boom, guess what? They're in my hands now. They're legal.
Yep.
They didn't ship those. They carted them over from Roanoke. And then companies like that have a larger market share,
Yes.
a large enough market share that at times they can dictate prices. During pre-releases, and this is something we run into in sick deals all the time, prices are much more prone to manipulation. Well, if they're more prone to manipulation, someone with more purchasing power has more leverage there. And while Ben is a great dude, and I don't necessarily think they'd do anything to screw an LGS, other companies might. And Star City isn't the only company that has that amount of purchasing power. So now, as an LGS, when I am planning my pre-release, I have to decide, am I going to budget as much product as I did before to this pre-release? Or am I going to budget some of it to cracking for singles? Which is an LGS, I kind of had to crack maybe a case anyways for singles because I have to have the singles for people if they want them.
Yep.
I don't need all of them.
No.
But I need some.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do I have to pay more for my cards at pre-release because they're legal? I can turn them faster.
Yes.
Or am I paying less? And this is all stuff that as a big vendor, you just pay less because what are they going to do? You have more money, so they can sell to you en masse. As an LGS, sometimes you have to say no to a buy.
Oh, yeah. Even as a vendor, I say no to buys at pre-releases all the time. I don't know if I've told the story anecdotally at the, not Brothers War, Dominaria United pre-release. I had a player open the Alt Art Karn promo, and they came to sell it to me, and they asked how much, and I'd been buying the regular one for $3 all day.
Yeah.
And that one was also $3, and I just pushed. I said, you don't want to know, because these are all priced like we're going to be opening them next week, which we will be. And they were like, oh, just give me the price anyway. And they're like, that's fair. And then, like, what? And then walked. Because it is kind of insulting to have to do that to people when you know your release is coming up as a vendor. When you know you're opening by the pallet, not the case. And it is difficult for us in those scenarios, too. It happens at events sometimes with awkward... It used to happen with awkward timing where Conspiracy 2 was available for purchase, but vendors couldn't open for like another week. So we had to push on like Ghostly Prison or Propaganda and Inquisition of Kozilek all weekend long. We just had to push those back because they're uncommons and we're just going to crack Infinite. We don't need to spend even quarters on them when the ROI on our cases is going to be like fractions of a cent. It is difficult.
Yeah.
But you brought up Star City and the OP ecosystem. For a vendor, that is kind of the third avenue, which is impacts. And it is preparing for these events now. If I'm going to that Star City event, and I'd signed on months ago for February 2nd through 3rd, I knew what the format of the event was going to be. I knew that I had no business dealing with singles ahead of time. My show lead, eventually, in the next couple of weeks or months, would have started to get things in order and everything would be fine. Now this announcement comes out and we have to figure out what the fuck we're going to do. Are we going to take pre-orders on site and then ship them, quote unquote, to the show? Like we are Star City, like we can do that. Star City is at least moving equipment and personnel, so they're trucking. They're not necessarily flying everything. I don't know if I can send personnel with orders for people. Okay, so that reduces the reason for us to crack and worry about it. All right, things are legal that weekend. Do we want to use our pre-order numbers to determine what we need to crack, inflated by a percentage, to determine what we're going to need to bring with us to put in the case? Right now, everybody's turning their noses at Koth. They've been doing that since the spoiling. But what happens if Koth between now and pre-release turns out to be the hottest card in the set?
Yeah.
Can we even afford to send any to that event to put in the case? Are they better on the website? And now we have to juggle all these kind of logistical issues about where our stock is best kept for that weekend. Do we just let Star City do it? It's their event, it's their captive audience. They can deal with the standard cards. Or do we want to try and make that splash, that impact, and just have them there? And it's a very difficult series of conversations to have, to rationalize, and then to actually fire on and stick with. And it's something you could experiment with as a vendor, absolutely, but it's always going to factor into every single event now that is scheduled at or around a pre-release. Because if this one does well, and it just so happens, this announcement came well after Star City picked everything.
Yeah.
This is serendipitous. It's not really coincidental. And I would expect that more of this might happen. This does bring back that large regional feeling for pre-releases like there used to be. And maybe this becomes the road show now for a pre-release.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what does our kit look like for that? I don't know. Now we have to create a new, not necessarily rule set, but like a new set of guidelines for these kinds of events. This is what we need to bring. This is how we have to bring it. It goes in pallet shipped, it comes out broken. Maybe that's what we've got to do. We don't fly with prices on cards because if TSA or customs opens anything, now you start getting charged. Can we fly with sealed? Do we we have to open it on prem? What are the rules that WotC are going to tell us about this kind of stuff? There's a lot that goes into this for this third aspect of as a vendor. And I can imagine between now and February, a lot of this will be felt out. But there's a really good chance that anybody who has the ability to serve product that they've opened because they brought it won't, because the logistics behind it are really, really difficult right now. And they might just want to see how Star City and some of the other vendors that are within driving distance handle this kind of thing before fly-in vendors attempt.
It's something that it doesn't seem malicious in any way that they're doing this. It seems like it's well intended.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it worse.
I think it makes it really difficult. Yeah, absolutely.
Like for an LGS, I feel like it makes it much worse because it's like literally, all right, well, we're gonna, everyone. Like, I think in the article they cited over the years, there's been a lot of people frustrated with the fact that they can't use their cards. Who?
Yeah, I don't understand who can't wait a week.
What? Players receiving cards and not being able to play them in sanctioned events until a week later. Man, do you know how many Pro Tours they've had on pre-release weekends? Like 3.
Good
you know
point.
how terrible that's going to be?
Oh, yeah. I think there was one Pro Tour where a CFB team made it to the event, but their mule was going to be days late, so they were in a mad dash for cards while their mule was on the way. It's this weird anecdotal story that either LSV or maybe Josh McClain tells.
Yeah.
About one of the Pro Tours like that. Yeah, I don't. That also makes no sense to me that people just can't wait to play F&M with their new cards. They want to play with them on Monday. Cool, I guess. You can play.
Just go to EDH, play them there, play with your friends. Maybe it's because I don't associate with many new players, because I haven't seen many new players around.
There's that.
But even though we're growing players by leaps and bounds, which we probably are
Somewhere.
in EDH, I don't know about 60 card formats. Blake, I feel for you. You have probably the hardest job at WotC, even more so than Marrow. There, I said it, because your job sucks. The company you work for sucks. Who told you to say that? Who's frustrated by this? Who said this is a good idea? I didn't even count how many exclamation points there are in this, but I see at least 4 at the end of paragraphs in this article. That's too many. It's mind-boggling that this was their decision, but I will beat that horse to death. The sky is falling.
Yeah.
Magic is dying. Hasbro printed too many cards, even though there's no evidence of it.
The one thing that this makes me think of, and I hate every moment of it because it is a slant against the LGS, 100%, is that between midnight Friday and F&M, if you don't order your cards from TCG Player or anybody who will ship you your cards between midnight pre-release and F&M to get to you, so let's say you overnight them. If you don't do that, you won't have the new tech for F&M unless your LGS had it for you or you were able to trade for it. But still a difficult proposition when everybody's looking for 4x of whatever it is. It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
And it creates the idea of rarity and a metagame that Richard Garfield wanted, which was that not everybody can own every copy of a card, so every place is going to be different. But that, like I said, is kind of a slight against the LGS, because if the LGS doesn't have it, then I'm still just going to order it from somewhere else.
Right.
Because I have the ability to have the card I need or the card I want. It is this weird, it's not even like giving with one hand and taking with another. I think I might be reading into it way too much, and people can feel free to tell me I am, but it just kind of seems that way, that you're putting the enjoyment of a 60-card format at the foothold of the LGS. And if the LGS cannot serve, then you're letting your players down, and there's no reason to have made this announcement anyway.
Yeah.
Not every LGS is Super Games. Not every LGS is connected to a vendor warehouse.
Yeah. Not every LGS has the luxury of being able to open a bunch of product knowing they may only sell 20 to 30% of it.
Yeah.
And it's the interesting thing too to me about this is that it's been open secret. Ben's tweeted about it, Calf's tweeted about it, everyone has tweeted about, hey, look, when we're cracking for stuff, we're opening set boosters. You know what actually sells in a store? Set boosters.
Yeah, it's the same.
You know what doesn't do anything in a store? Draft boosters.
Yeah, because they're the dedicated. They're the dedicated product that you need for those midweek drafts, and that's it.
So, what do I just eat into my set booster that I can actually sell to crack to get enough of this stuff, or I open the draft boosters, which are probably rotting, and I don't even want to order most of the time because those events aren't firing. It is mind-boggling to me.
It is. There's at every stage except the vendor who has a warehouse and a website. This is a logistical nightmare for people, and eventually it'll shake out for everyone. They'll figure it out. But it just seemed to come from nowhere. Because to your point, who cares? EDH players can just play what they want at any point in time. I open this on Saturday morning in my pre-release. I'm going to play it in my commander pod later in the day. Cool.
Yeah.
What's the problem? Nothing. You can't sanction any event anyway through Companion because it's all just regular REL. I mean, technically it's sanctioned as long as there aren't proxies. It's got a 1x multiplier. Who cares? You don't need a judge for shit anymore.
Nope.
What is
not even an RCQ.
Yeah. So what does it matter? This is just kind of born out of convenience to patch up an update cycle. It's now the entire Magic ecosystem is on the same update cycle because they wanted digital to be cooler for a while, and then they realized that wasn't the place to be. So instead of rolling digital back a week and asking people to play in paper for a hot 6 or 7 days, now you got to do it on Arena. Or sorry, now you got to move the paper date back. Like, that's the other thing is they could have gone the other way and just shoved and said you can draft and play sealed all you want between days X and Y on Arena, and that is parallel to the real world when the release of a set happens, and then constructed kicks on and you can play all those cards. Like, why didn't they go the other way with this one?
Yep.
It's not like you can play Commander on Arena yet. You know, they're not going to yet. You can only do that on Moto, and it's not like Moto has all the cards anyway, or a working copy of most of the cards anyway. So what are you trying to align with? This is
Yeah. It just seems like someone said, "Hey, you know what? Nah, we've gotten a lot of flack for screwing the LGS. Let's just put a fork in them."
I think this is just mental load bearing for the LGS. You gotta figure out how the hell this really impacts. Like, yeah, absolutely. If you're the smaller LGS, you're gonna get mushed by the larger one, who can afford to crack. Like, it is. I think that is a very dangerous aspect to this.
Yeah,
it really is. And the road show for larger regionals, yeah, absolutely. Has the opportunity to muck with some people. It's just a weird announcement, and I didn't see anybody who seemed very happy about it. To your point, it just seemed just like a lot of okay, and
just sure. Good job, guys. I guess.
Yeah, I didn't know I wanted this, but now I have it.
Yeah, I still don't know if I want it, but again, I've got it.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if I ever get back to working events, how that's going to line up.
Yeah,
being like just a hired gun, how everybody's going to handle it. Because I can imagine already a number of different people that I work for and their immediate responses to this. And I think more that I want to believe are just kind of thinking about like, fuck it. Who cares? Like,
deal with it later.
Yeah, exactly. Let the host have it. Yeah. The host gets the best location in the room per their thoughts. The host gets everything. They can be the one to deal with this bullshit.
Congrats, guys.
Exactly.
Congrats.
Exactly. All right, you ready to move on to picks?
Let's do it. I'm going to go first.
Yep.
All right, so mine started from an interest in the OP announcement that we're getting more modern events, whatever, and I was like, all right, let's take a look at the metagame. There's that deck I hate. I fucking hate this deck. But that's because I love Jund, and Jund has a terrible matchup with this deck. And that deck is Amulet Titan. The card you were asking, well, it was recently taken off the list, which was one of the reasons I've had my eye on it. And that card is the regular base version of Urza Saga from Modern Horizons 2. So, we were digging into the analytics a little bit before we started recording, and there were some very interesting data points we found out. So starting since October 13th, there have been a total of 1,400 copies of this card sold. Now, currently, across all conditions, there are 731 copies on TCG Player. Now, the most interesting thing about this is that in the last 4 days, so since the 16th till now when we're recording this episode on the 21st of December, of those 1,400 copies, 300 of them sold in the last 4 days. So this card's been taken off the list. We've hit the point where some distributors are now out of Modern Horizons 2, so there's not a ton of this stuff laying around anymore. The sets that this was on the list on were largely okay production-wise because most of them came out post-COVID when we had manufacturing back to where it needed to be for cardboard. This is something that is fairly well positioned. If you take a look at meta.io, Amulet Titan actually has the best win rate in the format right now. It is also a deck that, to use, I think, an appropriate term, has the hardest hardest simps in Magic. They love Urza's Saga. They love Amulet Titan. It's their favorite deck, and they will always play it no matter what. So there's an audience for this card. Now, in terms of turnaround, this is where I think things get a little bit dicey. So if you look at the stocks graph and we start at about October 30th and scroll over, you'll see that this price point is real steady. Okay, so if it's been real steady, well, 2/3 of the copies listed have sold. That tells me that timeline-wise, may not be very long, actually. Now, granted, it's still the holidays.
Yes.
We're still waiting to get into tax season.
Yep.
We still have to wait for, I believe it's going to be Dallas in February is the next regional championship or whatever, and it'll be a little bit after that.
Yeah.
So I would expect we may be able to get in for the next month and a half to 2 months tops. Copy-wise, well, unfortunately, this is not really an EDH card. This is a 60-card format card. So price barrier is a little bit higher, but we want to be buying in multiples of 4. Now, to make it really worth your while, I would say get between 8 to 16 copies. That's a few decks worth. So you can go to your events, you can trade them out. You can go to your LGS, partner with them, see if they need any, and you can certainly hold them to buy list. Now, right now, our low is sitting around, I think, $26, which is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
That means, realistically, if you're just not straight buying them from Card Kingdom, which obviously you can, you're probably looking at about $20 to $22 is what you're probably going to get into them if you're trading for them straight across. I'm assuming you didn't pay full retail for all the cards in your trade binder, that some of those came through packs or whatever else. Cool. That is what we're looking for. Now, if I'm doing this, again, we're getting 8 to 16 copies. Reasonably, I would expect to out these by trade a little bit earlier, probably mid-February, looking at about 2 months. Buy list, maybe a little bit more. Now, the reason for that is, obviously, it's buy list. It's not going to catch up as quick. We also have an interesting thing going on, though, to keep an eye on. Card Kingdom's buying for TCG low. They are, at this exact moment, paying $24. So it's technically $2 less than TCG low, but credit arbitrage is available now at $31.20. And the wild thing about this, they want 136 copies. This is not something that they're like low on.
No.
This is something they want. They're also paying more for list copies. Sure. But again, the list is gone. We don't have it anymore. So it may be a little bit quicker, but I still think we're going to see late February, early March is my guess, but I wouldn't be surprised. Pay attention to the buy lists, because if this velocity keeps going, this card's going to dry up real quick, and you'll notice buy lists turn on very fast for it, because it is something that, sure, it's modern. It's still one of the more popular 60-card formats out there. I would say it's still probably more popular than Pioneer because it's modern. So keep an eye out, but it was something that I'd been paying attention to, and we looked at the actual velocity before the episode. I was like, all right, we can't wait on this anymore. I'm going to go ahead and pick it now. Our window is much shorter than a lot of my picks and even a lot of yours. So if you're going to do it, get in quick and make sure you pay attention, because I don't think that this is going to be the kind of card that is going to have a long window of opportunity. I think it's going to be as quick as our investment opportunity is. Not that it's a pump and dump, because I don't think it is by any means, because pump and dump to me implies more manipulation than following the actual market trend. I don't think this is a card that's being manipulated. I think this is, even looking at the sales history on TCG, you can see it's not like someone bought 36 copies in an order or something. It's all a few copies here and there. It's people finishing out decks. I think it's way more likely, though, that this could be one of the better quick turnarounds you can have, which to me makes the slightly increased barrier of entry much more worth it, because you're not parking, $240 on 10 copies of this card or whatever. For a year and a half, you're parking them for a couple months.
Yeah. Yep. No, I like it. When we were talking about this, it was like, okay, we're going to upcycle the pick or not. We hemmed and hawed, and then we took a look at Vila, and we're like, yeah, we absolutely have to. Because when we picked this originally, we didn't expect Modern to take the turn it did in terms of format variety. It became a very stale format, and eventually, with the banning of, I think, Luris followed, and then Yorion after that.
Yeah.
And it kind of reset Modern again. And while things look to be quote-unquote solved, there are a number of good decks to be playing. Without a premier event, you're not getting all the same level of competitor that you would normally for a format like Modern. And once we have that big push, then we should see the format straighten up a little bit, and we will see possibly the return to form of Hammer alongside this. We might see Tron pick up, and we might see Amulet pick up. And all 4 of those decks use Saga X4.
Yep.
And who knows what else people want to play with.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of artifacts because Phyrexia. So who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe there's a bunch of broken 1-drops that we just forgot to play test because we're Wizards of the Coast.
Look, Skull Clan went through a lot of iterations, okay? Now, the one thing I do want to mention when you're talking about timeline is that there's kind of an insulating factor around price. So if you do take a little longer to figure out, is this a card for you, etc., the Gaming Co. is anchoring this, like we talked about the last couple of weeks, with 269 copies, near mint, at $37.99. And that is a far cry from where we are right now at low, but it runs to 40 plus very quickly from there.
Yeah.
When you look at copies vendors with copies of 4 or more. So you've got some time to pick up on this if you want and figure out how you want to approach this. But absolutely, this is something that you can take a look at now and decide if you want to get in on. And even if you need your set to play, now's the time you're going to want to do it.
Yeah.
You'll have the same window no matter what. So this could even just be a cost-saving technique. If you've waited this long to pick up your sagas, it's not going to be too long before they 1.5x.
Yeah.
And from there, possibly 2x from where we are right now. Overall, I like the pick. It serves as a reminder to me that I need to pick up my extra copies so I can have Hammer and I can have was it Breach? Something else? Some other weird deck that I was trying to play?
Yeah, Breach I think ran it or Legacy Breach did, yeah.
Yeah.
R.I.P.
Just, two decks with Saga side by side in the gauntlet because I have, some very nice proxies sitting next to me with the words Urza Saga written on them, which work out really, really well.
They could even be Time Spiral. Who knows?
Exactly. Well, they're on lands. That's how I do my proxies. Force of Will in the same stack. I don't think this is the same deck. All right. One of them was a Learn. The other one, I think, was when I was testing Amulet. Haha. And how the turns have tabled. And I think, like I said, even then, it serves as a reminder for people like, this is a card you should pick up. This is a card you need to look at. Ancillarily, if there are people moving into Modern and you want to start making, like, quick little packages, you can take a look at the cards on Nexus Saga as well.
Yep.
Because as this rises, it will bring a lot of the other ancillary cards alongside it with it. Those being some of the core cards to Hammer, some of the core cards to Amulet, some of the core cards to Tron. So I think it's a great look and a great upcycle. For me, I'm sticking with the, I think, Commander Blue theme. Was I on blue last week? I can't remember. What was my pick?
Yeah, you were.
I don't know.
Either last week or the week before. You were on blue.
We're going with a card that's been near and dear to my heart forever, but is fucking terrible. And it is Archmage Ascension from Battle for Zendikar. This
Brainstorm's so good with this card.
This card is a fucking doozy. So I've got the stocks graph up now so you can try and figure out what this card is doing as I explain it to you. So it costs 2 and a blue for an enchantment. And like the other Ascensions, it says at the beginning of each end step... Sorry. It has two... there's two things. There's 2 triggers. Yeah. One, the second one, which is ridiculous to put it second, is how you put counters on it. The first one is what happens when there are counters on it. So at the beginning of each end step, if you drew 2 or more cards this turn, you may put a quest counter on Archmage's Ascension, like all the other ones. As long as Archmage's Ascension has 6 or more quest counters on it, if you would draw a card, you may instead search your library for a card and put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. So every draw spell just becomes a tutor for every card you draw. Yeah. Imagine casting Brainstorm, and instead of casting Brainstorm, you resolve Demonic Tutor 3 times. That sounds delightful. And that is what
Sign me up.
Yeah, that's what Archmage's Ascension is here to do. And while I was falling all over the text of that card, you'll notice that the stocks graph is basically a rope, and it just starts to just climb its little roller coaster hill, starting around, I'd say, Strixhaven, officially. Climbs, plateaus for a hot second, dips, and now we're on the second crest. So, what are we looking at with this card? Why do we care? Well, as far as Commander is concerned, this is seemingly split between slower decks that want to play as much Magic as possible in one game and faster combo decks, because it does exactly what it says. It appeals to players who want to draw cards and players who just want to find what they need at any given point in time, because they want to play as much Magic as possible. So they're going to cast Cyclonic Rift and pass the fucking turn. Like psychopaths. No follow-up. Sorcery speed. Or people who just want to Thoracle you out of the game and have a backup plan with Archmage's Ascension and just twiddle their thumbs until they get there.
It happens.
But that's it. That's the split. There's no Venn diagram, it seems, for this card when you look at it from a Commander standpoint. Okay, so what's the financial driver? Well, the financial driver is that back in June, Card Kingdom was buying 45 copies for $1.35, and now they're buying 19 for 30 cents. So while the market is still floating, Card Kingdom is currently downtrending on the buy list. So it looks absolutely rancid. TCG player market, oddly enough though, has been flat basically ever since. That's the plateau we're looking at. And that's where we are. That's why we're here. This is where we want to be. Card Kingdom's not selling this card. Commander players don't see this as an interesting card to play. And I'll get to that in a minute.
They're wrong, but
I find it interesting that from a strategy standpoint, it's a polarizing card. There's no overlap. You either want to play a long game with a deck helmed by like Alondo the Seer, a Temsis All-Seeing, Nezahal Primal Tide, these big, goofy generals that do nothing, or you combo kill with Azami Lady of Scrolls and Quain the Interret Meddler. That's the Azor Rabbit. While divisive, and that's something I look for in cards and their popularity in the format, I'm not terribly concerned about it. Because this is the self-reporting section of players that are really looking into this card. And it's not that relevant to them. And this is like the 4th time I've said that. Because I think this is an Invisibles card. This is 100% an Invisibles card. Sales records show that this is being bought 1 copy at a time, so it is selling to Invisible Commander players. They're not self-reporting. It's not those kind of people. And while I can't say with certainty what strategies this is being employed into the kitchen table level, I feel confident in saying that it'll be in the longer game kind of builds, and possibly that missing piece of like the mid-game build decks.
Yeah.
Like what we're missing for that, that's the Invisibles. They're playing it to the mid-game. I believe this is truly just happening below the surface. And that means it's most likely being extracted from binders where this exists, bulk bins where this exists. Once a lot of those avenues dry up, we'll start to see it actually start to drive up financially again. Now, regardless of who's playing this, the fact remains that this card isn't overpowering, it just gets the job done. It can do everything from finding your answers to ending the game, and that flexibility and utility cannot be overstated. Non-threatening is super key. Now, it does take some time to stack up and turn on, and how you want to do that is also emblematic of the strategy being employed. Slower decks will rely on a few number of activated abilities to do this, from like Temple Bell and like shit like that, where you're just tapping widgets and wadgets to draw cards. Well, combo strategies will look for huge redundancy with untapped pieces for their tap activated abilities, mono sinks that draw cards, and then a slew of cantrips. It's just backups to backups to backups, just to ensure that if they have to go the Archmage Ascensions route, they can just turn it on in a turn cycle and a half.
Pretty good.
Yeah. As far as a timeline on this is concerned, going back to the point about Card Kingdom now buying this for a quarter of what they were, I think we're actually looking to move this card in trade for the time being because it's not moving at a high velocity. Invisibles don't always buy from vendors. They don't always buy from TCG Player. But they do show up to LGSs. We talk about them all the time at the LGS level.
All the time.
Sometimes they're the people that just walk in, throw down 120, and walk out with that set booster or the draft booster box. And then come back the next set, and you don't see them again between. Sometimes they come into every Commander night, and they just trade out of their 3-inch D-ring binder. Yeah.
God, I hate those.
What makes this worthwhile to pick up now is the stepwise pricing that we see on TCG Player, where it goes from $2 to $3 within a few listings, then runs up to $4 within a page of listings, is really attractive to us because we can get in at like bargain basement prices, essentially.
Yeah.
And if we move in now, we should be able to get ahead of the market price trend as it is turning back up and move out and trade at a profit in pretty short order. So I'd say sometime within the next month or two, you'll be able to get out at a profit, even though small.
Yeah.
Now, reprint equity on this is kind of interesting because alongside the Black Ascension, which is Bloodchief's Ascension, this is the only one of the cycle to not get a proper reprint yet. Beastmaster's Ascension has been in several years worth of Commander product, and I'm talking like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Luminarch Ascension, the White Ascension, was in M25, a core set. Pyromancer's Ascension was in Modern Masters 2 and the Chandra Spellbook. So I would consider Modern Masters 2 more of the realistic reprint than the Chandra Spellbook. So, as this card overall does not play well in draft product, I don't expect it to be there, obviously. And I do not believe this is an effect that WotC would place in a Commander product, as it's hard to balance around and ensure you could trigger. I think the opportune time was when they thought putting Windfall was a good idea in Commander precons, and we're no longer there. This, I believe, the only way we'll see it reprinted is like Bloodchief's Ascension on the list. Or some similarly narrow product, some insert product. I think we're kind of insulated here. As far as quantity is concerned, because we're looking to move these in trade for the medium to long term, I do not think going past 2 playsets is where you want to be. Currently, I have my set from playing back in Zendikar, so I'd be picking up an additional 2 sets to trade out.
I think the really interesting thing about this here is when you mention reprint equity, and I think this is very important. What we've seen historically, because I think you're right, the place we're most likely to see this is really just the list. None of the list printings have been at enough quantity to really make a meaningful impact on the price of the card.
No, I think you would have to look at... I mean, the obvious parallel, because like I said, is Bloodchief's Ascension.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is it's just too good.
Yeah. It's a 2-card kill.
Yeah.
Right? Because it kills with Sanguine or one of the part of that combo. It replaces another one.
Yeah,
Exquisite Blood or Sanguine. One or the other.
At the beginning of each end step, if an opponent lost 2 or more life this turn, you may put a quest counter on Bloodchief's Ascension. Hooty-hoo. Whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, if Ascension has 3 or more quest counters on it, you may have that player lose 2 life. If you do, you gain 2 life. Yeah. So all you have to do is mill 1, and then you pop off with essentially the Sanguine Bond combo. So it is not a reader. It is a redundant piece. Yet another. In that combo. And I'm sure if you take a look at stocks, we see it just jumps insanely and then comes back down to life. I'm sure the list has something to do with that, but the floor on it after the list reprinting is still so much higher than that almost literal double up.
Yeah. And this is one that The templating on this one and balancing is so much harder than Bloodchief that Bloodchief, I could have seen a reprint at some point elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But the list made sense because of the power level.
Yeah.
Whereas with Archmage Ascension, the templating is really hard to do. That's the thing that I think really sets it over for me, is that the templating is much, much harder.
Yeah.
And then you add in the fact that, to me, I think you're right that this is an Invisibles card because it fits so well in like the 75% range.
Yeah.
Like when you're in not quite Battle Cruiser, not quite CEDH, but basically there.
Yeah.
And that those to me are the cards that I feel like the Invisibles are much more likely to make use of and not report on, because it's not like you have at that point anyone outside of your play group to really influence your play style. Mm-hmm. You're not really reporting on EDH, right? You're not that self-reporting audience, just like you said. So the fact that it hits at that 75% range means it hits the Invisibles for sure, and it hits your self-reporters as they evolve as players.
Yeah.
Just really good.
Yeah. I think we will see this more pop up on Rec more over time, as the generalist is getting to be pretty wide at this point without any kind of overlap. And like I said, that missing like mid-game piece that I think that the Invisibles kind of live in. And as that happens and more people see the card and they start seeing it associated with more and more, generals throughout, this is just something that gets swept up by, the regular player.
Yeah.
And whether people choose to pick it up or not, or understand the power of it, is to be seen. But this just stands as a card that right now you can pick up and move in trade pretty positively in pretty short order. Like, the other thing that I was surprised when I saw this, and I talked about the idea of playing as much Magic as possible. I don't mean in the kind of way where I actually play this card in Commander. I have 2 decks that I don't like playing anymore because they go too long. Crash the Bloodbraid is just Jund out. It's Jund. Yep. It is 50% Jund. That's it. What's your matchup percentage at any point in time? 50%. That's the joke. It is Boom or Jund.
Yep.
And it is a very long game. The other is Dromar. It is a very long game deck. Yep. At one point in time, the card Moat was in there. We're going for the long haul with Dromar, right?
You are not kidding.
And I could trigger this pretty reliably and pretty easily. And so those are that control style deck doesn't seem to exist yet. And I think as people begin to understand the power of the card, or maybe move back into Mystic Remora and Rhystic Study to fight back against Smothering Tithe and Dockside Extortionist, we could see the uptick here, because Control has to figure out a way to play.
Yeah.
And to win with Control, you have to have your answers. And the best way to do that is to set this card up with Mystic Remora, with Rhystic Study, with Brainstorm on an Isochron Scepter. It doesn't matter. You got to be able to set this up so that every time thereafter, when you zero Jace the Mind Sculptor, you detutor, and put 2 cards back that are irrelevant.
Yeah.
Spin top to put the 3rd card on top because it's better than the 2 you just put back. That's what you need to be doing. That's the power of this card. And eventually, in time, that's where I see this going inside the format. I don't think it'll take somebody like Tomer to pick this up, or Krim from Commander Clash. I don't think it'll take game nights. I think it'll just happen naturally over time as people start evolving their lists.
Yeah.
But I have faith in this card in the long term.
Yeah, I think, again, this is really solid. It's also a card that I think it goes really well with a card that I think probably should be banned in EDH, and that is Consecrated Sphinx.
Yes.
And the reason I think that's relevant is because Consecrated Sphinx to me is a gateway drug. It's a gateway card to when you do get into CEDH. Like I was saying, it hits that whole range of casual blending into competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just incredibly good to have that.
Consecrated Sphinx is also in that Dromar list. Like,
Of course.
yeah, because why not? Why wouldn't I do
naturally.
that? Yeah. Why wouldn't I figure out a way to ensure that I could emblem my Venser and then flicker your entire board out of the game?
Right?
It was CEDH before CEDH was CEDH.
Basically. It's great.
Yeah, it is. Dromar is a hoot. So, I think that's going to be it for this week, right?
Yep, we are good to go.
All right. So, for at MTG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube, I am at Halt I am Reptar on Twitter. You are
At Thirsty Sizzler.
We'll see you next week.